Welcome to another edition of the Black Wealth Experience podcast. And just today, I'm excited about today because we sometimes we get to talk to people that are just getting started or they're just getting going, and they don't have, I guess I would say, the knowledge from generations or the knowledge from what's going on in the last 50 years of America in our history and where we've been going and where we've come from. Sometimes, Tia was telling me about, she watched the ones with my kids. Well, my kids are only in their early 30s, right? So they haven't seen, my son was calling me today to tell me about a X-Men cartoon and animation that was on there from 1999 that he remembers when he was 10 years old. And so, we had this long, great conversation. But if I were to have a conversation about wealth or where we've come through or what redlining was or, what project housing was, he has no reference for that. Right. And today we have T.A. Taylor Hunt on today on the podcast with a breadth of knowledge. And she is still doing, she's been in the military. She's, traveled across the country. She's been part of what we've seen happen. And what we say is, what my son's generation gets to have standing on the backs and the shoulders of things that she did back in the day, and that I've been able to benefit from. And we're not where we want to be, but we sure come a long way, from where we were. And so I really want to talk about wealth today because that's one of the things that we don't get a chance to talk about very often. And money, we tend to spend a whole lot of time on I don't even want to say solutions, just surviving. I was talking to a group of folks that are part of a program called the Deerfield program, which is an ability to have, $40,000 towards a down payment on a new home and home ownership. And that's what we're talking about. But when we started our conversation yesterday, it was about, okay, where are we at now? And then how do we get to another place, realizing this is where we've come from, and really thinking through, okay, there's a lot of folks that we had a whole bunch of young people in the room, who had no idea, what redlining even was, or how that affected us, or why isn't the population in Denver, or why is it that only 36.5% of people of color that are able, or black or African Americans actually own homes in Colorado, at an age that they can, compared to the national average, which is like 47%. And so, that's because things weren't the same as they are now. So, TA, thank you for being on today. I am so excited to talk to you. I got the opportunity. We were able to talk the other day, and I just knew there was something special about the wisdom and the things that you have for us. So if you can kind of just tell us a little bit about your story, maybe where you grew up, where you're from, when you came to Colorado, why you came to Colorado, or unless you were born here. I don't know that yet. And then, some of the things that you've seen over time, and we can kind of just start there.
Okay, well, I appreciate you having me on, and this is obviously an area that I am passionate about. Anything that is going to help just improve, or let's say move forward the conversation and the actions that we can take as a community to make things different. I mean, short version, I was born and raised in Philly. I am a city girl through and through, and I do have those experiences. I'm a North Philly project girl, so I know about the projects, and then I know about moving to a different neighborhood, and I know about white flight that happened when we moved into that neighborhood, and subsequently how the neighborhood changed over time because of that disinvestment. Mm-hmm. Not just with the real estate in terms of homes, but in terms of what type of stores would be in the area, and the beginnings of food deserts, and why we have food deserts, and yet we have the equivalent of 7-Elevens on every other corner. So leaving that, I went in the Air Force. I was in the Air Force for 25 and a half years. Okay. So quite a long time, and I got to travel the world. And the thing that was common to me was wherever I went, I could find our community. Mm-hmm. And there was also work to do. People have misunderstanding that people in the military don't need help. Commissaries have long taken WIC and SNAP, and they do because many lower grades in the military, they do not make that kind of money. When you talk about the defense budget, you're not talking about us. You're talking about defense contractors who are making that money. There's a different slice that goes to personnel. So I always knew that I was going to go in the military and I was going to be a lawyer.
Okay.
So I came to Colorado only because they had a law school with an evening program, which was DU. And at that time, it was located out near Lowry.
Okay.
So that worked. I came to Lowry. I started my first year of law school, my last year of the Air Force.
Okay.
I started the evening program, and then I retired from the Air Force, and then I finished. I just went days and nights to get it done. Now, part of what you said about positioning ourselves, before I went to law school, I went back to school and got my master's. Now, I didn't really need that, but looking at the landscape of what was available for us, I knew that just in case law school didn't work, I could take that degree and my military experience and still be able to do pretty much what I wanted to do. But I knew from before I entered law school that I was going to work with our community. And I knew I wanted to do it differently. I wanted to be able to offer legal services and advocacy in a way that was where sort of what I see you doing is we have to stop hiding the ball. We have to stop pretending or acting like we're the only ones with the secret. And we lawyers really are the holders of access to justice. And so if I'm only going to share information with you once you have given me a retainer and move that forward, then I don't think I'm doing what I'm supposed to do with the gifts God gave me. And if you look at our history, first of all, I wouldn't be able to go to law school if other people hadn't really put up with a lot and done all sorts of things to make that possible. And I don't believe that you can forget that. I don't believe that I have the right to act as though I did all this on my own and therefore I can go do what I want, make as much money as I want. And I mean, sure, you want to be economically secure, you want your family to be economically secure, but we can't do that at the expense of our community. And so I think probably right when I was in law school, that's right shortly after I lost my husband, one of the best gifts he gave me was a concept called legal wellness. We were trying to figure out how to package this, how to present it. And the fact is, legal wellness is about working with our community and teaching people about the law before it impacts their life, before that disaster, before we lose the home, because we have no idea how to properly title the home. Or, as I'm sure you've seen, we have so many myths about what to do with legal documents and why we don't need them. And, well, I can do this myself, and I'm just going to, I think the bane of my existence, and this touches on the housing component, is quitclaim deeds. I wish there were no quitclaim deeds in the universe. Okay. When you talk about affecting generational wealth for us, quitclaim deeds have caused us to improper use and lack of knowledge with quitclaim deeds has cost us properties.
Oh, absolutely.
It has cost us the ability to rent a property, to own a property so that we could use it for investments for future generations. We've used them so poorly that we have lost property that our elders worked for generations.
Give me an example, because as I think of people, some people are saying, what is a quitclaim deed if they've never owned a home, or and a way to pass it. So maybe you can kind of talk about, the use of quitclaims and how they maybe one way that they work well, and then maybe kind of really talk about, some examples of what you mean by how we've lost properties that way. That's a
Well,
great.
well, thanks. One of the things, most people know that a house has to have a title. Someone owns the property. That may or may not be the same person who is listed on the mortgage. Those can be different. All right. And so when we sell our house, say if I sold my house to you, we're going to use a standard deed, most likely called a warranty deed. All right. When we buy a new home from a builder, we're going to get a warranty deed. But there are many other types of deeds. If someone is under conservatorship and guardianship, there's a conservatorship deed. When someone dies and they do have an estate to set up, then it's a personal representative's deed. So personal representative is the term we now use that used to be executor.
Okay.
So most people are familiar with executor. In the middle, there's a lot of different deeds, maybe special warranty deed, but quitclaim deeds, which sadly are available online now and in Office Depot and all sorts of places. They are deeds that transfer the property from one person to another or add an individual's name to the property. But the challenge is in the title, quit claim. All I'm doing is I'm quitting, leaving, well, this generation doesn't do that. But when I was growing up, if you were going with someone when you were a child, like dating someone or seeing someone, and then when you weren't going to do that anymore, you quit them.
Yeah.
No, I quit you first.
I quit you first. No, you quit me.
It's hilarious.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So you are with a quit claim. If I sign one, I am giving you the whatever interest I have in the property. Whatever part I own, I'm giving it to you. Okay. And that may or may not be the entire property. I may own part of the property. And again, that gets back to how property is titled. Years and years ago, if a couple purchased a home, it would tend to be in what we call joint tenants with rights of survivorship. So if one spouse died, then it would automatically go to the other one. All you have to do is show the death certificate. But then when more people started partnering up, shall we say, then we didn't use joint tenants with rights of survivorship as much. We still do. It's still the predominant deed. But we also use tenants in common. And that means that each person owns their share, which sadly means each person can give away their share.
So if they pass, then half of it may go to
their half could go however their planning is set up. And that can be problematic. So, but I found people who have purchased a home together with the intent of it being joint tenants with rights of survivorship, but they don't read the deed.
Gotcha.
Because you get so many documents at the closing, you have a stick, and you just put those away and you don't look at them again. Most people don't. So that's important to look at. Now, quitclaim deed usage in our community, I don't think any of these are deliberate mistakes. I don't think they're intentional. I think it's lack of knowledge, because most quitclaim deeds are going to be used in the context of an individual who is going to have to qualify for Medicaid. And we have so many myths out there in our community about Medicaid. Well, Medicaid is the program that pays for medical care for people who are unable to afford it, people who have no income or low income. It is also the only program in this country that pays for long-term care.
Gotcha.
And Medicare does not pay for long-term care. It pays for short-term. When you get out of the hospital stay, you go to rehab. Medicare will pay for a certain number of days. People think that Medicare will pay for long-term, but it doesn't. Medicaid is that. And so, of course, you have to have very low assets and you really can't have much. So people think, well, I'm going to use this deed and I'm going to transfer the house from my mother to me, and that way I'll save the house for the family so Medicaid doesn't take it. Now, Medicaid is not in the housing business.
No, they're not.
They just aren't. Okay. They don't go around the country snatching people's houses.
No.
Medicaid is going to pay all the bills, and then Medicaid at the end, if when a person passes, there's something called estate recovery.
Mhm.
And estate recovery is in all the states, so you know there's no avoiding it. And they are going to send you a bill saying this is how much we spent. Um, please pay us back. And if you can pay it back, you pay it back, and you're going about your business, or you negotiate it. Usually, you can negotiate it. If you can't pay it back, that's when they place a lien on the house, so that when that house is sold, they're going to get theirs first, you know,
Gotcha.
assuming they're the
Mhm.
primary lien holder. Now, if there is a spouse still living in the home, they're going to do nothing. They don't do anything until the second person dies.
Okay.
And sometimes we don't realize that. And there is also allowances made to be sure there's sufficient income for that community spouse to remain
Okay.
the property. And many of us don't know about that.
No.
So the problem with us using that quitclaim deed is twofold. We transferred it. However, Medicaid is going to look and see. They look back at that person's records and see, did they make any transfers in the
Mhm.
last 5 years?
Okay.
And if they did, they're going to snatch it back.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're going to take the value of it is going to come back in. And so you really can't, it doesn't work. It used to be 3 years, but then Medicaid figured out there's a lot of people out here trying to find ways around it. So they increased it to 5 years. So that's a big issue that I see with Medicaid. And there are ways you can contact an attorney. We do advanced Medicaid planning. So
Okay.
you can make some plans to protect your elder, which we definitely should be doing. But
Mhm.
the risk to our elders in doing that is if you have put, let's just say you've added your name to your parents' deed, because that way you're thinking, oh, the house belongs to both of us, so Medicaid can't take
Mhm.
it. Well, you go out there, you have a car accident, and your insurance, the other people are injured, your insurance pays, and it pays up to your policy limits, which is all they're obligated to do. But the person's injuries are $100,000 more. Well, that means they're going to sue you
Yes, they are.
because they need to get that amount recovered. And they're going to search for your assets. And what are they going to find?
Your house, because
They're
you put
going
it
to
down.
find your parents' home
Mm-hmm.
because it's yours.
Yep.
And so that's one quick, easy way to be forced to sell a property, because over a certain amount, they can go to court and force a foreclosure unless you're able to pay that. So any type of risk. So to me, that creates just an inordinate risk for our seniors. And I don't think most adult children want that risk. They just don't
No.
know that that risk is there.
Yeah.
They're making this move because they think it's going to be protected. But
Well, isn't it also that, you know, and I'm adding to this here, but you know, if you give your son or your daughter, you quit claim them to the deed, and then as soon as you do that, doesn't that now start them owning the house at that whatever the value is of that house, and then if the value grows, let's say over a 10-year period, $200,000 in equity, now isn't there a capital gains issue that you would have to pay taxes on as well? By now their ownership is yours as well. Not
well,
just
I mean, that could happen if the property is sold.
yeah, eventually.
Right. If the property is sold, that could happen. Now, what we also need to be aware of that is protective is if we don't do that and we
Mhm.
go through the standard process, the person passes and we process their estate and everything is to be sold and the proceeds go to their adult children.
Mhm.
Then it's to your advantage because there may be a gain, but it may be very small because now you get to look back at the what it cost your parents when they purchased that home in Denver all
Mhm.
those years ago for $35,000. And then that difference between that and what you're able to sell it for, you get that basis as though you were them. You
Mm-hmm.
see, so you can very easily wind up with no gain or much less.
Yeah,
If
my wife's grandmother died, and she was in Southern California in the city called Montebello there, and she had purchased her home for $14,000 back in the day or whatever. So then when she passes away, she's 90 some years old. She passes away. Now the house they sold it for 700 and some $1,000, but they didn't have to pay any capital gains because they based it on that 14,000 that she bought it for. But had she put any of those kids' names on the deed and did that quick claim deed to them, then they would have been responsible for thousands of dollars in taxes.
right, and that's something that's a lack of access to the information.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that we get the stepped up basis is what it's called,
Okay.
and that you'll have that. But again, that requires planning. And sadly, the last issue with quitclaim deeds is one, people just don't know how to use them. They don't know how to fill them out.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also very easy to use to defraud our seniors. When someone is got a caregiver, and sadly, the caregiver can be a family member,
Mm-hmm.
and they surreptitiously add their name
Okay.
or they persuade the senior to
Mm-hmm.
sign it. And that is where we have had heartbreaking stories where a senior has been unaware that this adult person now owns their home, and seniors have been evicted from their property. Now, there's not a lot you can do about dishonest people because
Mm-hmm.
you have to have something else going on in your soul to do that to a senior. But what I think it requires is discussions amongst the family, and it requires an openness to let's learn what we need to learn. The senior is getting older. Let's do some planning. What steps do we need to take to protect everyone? I get calls all the time where people think someone has passed away and they say, well, I'm their agent, so I can deal with this. But no, you can't, because powers of attorney, which appoint an agent, one for medical and one for financial, they cease to be operative when a person passes away. And so the sad part for me is we as a community, we are blended families. We
We
have raised children who are not our own, but are our own. And we fully well intend for them to be cared for when we pass away, just as they were when we were alive.
Mm-hmm.
But the law doesn't recognize that.
Yeah.
They don't see those children because they're not biological children.
Yeah.
So they're suddenly left out. And so the only way to avoid that is to do planning and to name them. When you say, this is to my children, you specify
Their names.
those children's names, and they then are part of the legacy that you always intended to happen. So I think the thing that scares me is we move so quickly without information, which is why I really appreciate what you're doing and with our legal wellness presentations, because I think if I am talking to 10 people in the room, I'm actually talking to 100, because we will share information.
Yes.
We will definitely share information, and it's critical with our seniors, but it's intergenerational now because you have so many young adults moving back home.
Yes.
So you're suddenly in a position where the senior could pass and 2 generations don't have a place to live.
And we see that happening so much is, the planning hasn't been put in place. Like you said, blended families, children that aren't biological are living in a place, and all of a sudden, the person that had purchased the house and is I guess the staple of creating that house is now gone. And then, some kids think that they just get to live there forever, because they don't know what the situation is or the bills, because we don't talk about finances a lot in our families even. And they have no idea that, oh, there's a lien on this house for $200,000. And that means that the bank is going to want their $200,000, and the people living in the house don't qualify for another mortgage for that $200,000.
Right. And that's a challenge that we definitely face. Adult children who have lived with the parent for years, but when the parent passes away, they are unable to qualify for the home in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really almost, I don't know, part of me wants to say that's unforgivable because I don't mean it in the, spiritual sense.
Yeah.
But if you are living there all those years, there is no planning. I mean, at some point you weren't paying rent in most cases. So where was the money going? We have to talk about finances more because we have to help people understand that you have to be doing some set asides. You have to have that, not just, I'm not talking about just an emergency fund. You know that you didn't purchase the home, so you have to at least keep yourself in a position to qualify for the home in your own right.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's very few cases where I'm able to get an assumption of the mortgage. Because they don't like to do that. They want to know that you have signed the paperwork and you make enough money to be responsible for the mortgage. So that's really challenging. And then if you add in siblings, one child thinks that they're supposed to continue living in the home, but the other 4 siblings think this property needs to be sold so I can get my share.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you have a problem. Now, if you couldn't qualify for the home in your own right, how are you going to buy out the share of your 4 siblings? So, I mean, that is a problem for me. And I think that one affects us so much that it really does prevent us from being able to, even if we weren't going to pass the property down,
Mm-hmm.
but to be able to have proceeds from that you could then share and set aside for the grandchildren. But people think, I've done this to the deed, but in my will, I'm going to leave the house to this person. But it doesn't work like that because the will can't transfer property. It can't transfer real property, houses, things like that, because they have titles.
Yeah, it's just the wishes.
They have titles.
Yeah.
It's like we do that insurance. I mean, when I grew up, the insurance man truly was the one who came around, knocked on the door every Friday to get their piece of what little money my mother made.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you have these insurance policies, but who's the beneficiary? Some people haven't checked their beneficiaries since they got the policy.
Yeah.
Some people think, well, I'm going to leave it to my children. Well, you leave insurance money to minor children, you have to go to court to get someone appointed to be a conservator, which is the person responsible for money, because the insurance company cannot legally disperse money to children, not to minors. Right? And there's nothing that's going to change that because those are separate agreements. So we have to look at it like there's a whole pie of family business. And we have to look at each piece, how the property is titled, what's owed on the property. Is there a reverse mortgage on the property? A reverse mortgage means that property is going to go right back to the lender unless, again, you can qualify for that. Now, there are some appropriate times for using a reverse mortgage because my focus is it's on the senior. What can I do to protect the senior? And if a reverse mortgage is appropriate, then that's what I'm doing. Now, I would like it if the senior had the conversation with the adult children, but I can't force that. And attorney-client privilege means I don't get to say a word. I don't even get to say I'm your lawyer. You could say it, but
and when I do reverse mortgages, I ask, can we have this conversation with your kids because they're the ones who are going to be affected by this when you do pass. Yes, we name quality of life and what you need to do now, and it's your house, but at the same time, let's make some provisions. Maybe we take out, one example, we did not too long ago, took out $25,000 out of the equity in it and purchased a life insurance policy that would pay for, that would have paid the house off. so we did it that way. So it worked in two ways. But yes, you are so correct that they should be part of the decision. And I guess what would you say, because this is I haven't heard it as much these days, but I used to hear it all the time when I was a kid, is I'm not leaving them people, talking about their kids, nothing. I ain't doing
Well,
what you doing for me now.
there's a lot of that. And what I learned as a lawyer
Mhm,
is, and this is really simplified version of a discussion about generation skipping.
mhm,
There are a lot of parents who do not want to leave anything to their kids
mhm,
because they feel like they've done their part with those kids, or they feel like those kids are ungrateful, don't appreciate things, whatever they think.
mhm.
But rarely do I meet parents who don't want to leave something to their grandchildren.
Yes, absolutely.
So I focus not on what we can do for yours. I focus on what can we do for those grandbabies.
Yes.
And that's where it's so much easier for me to get them to understand how I'm not talking about Susie Orman Trust. I'm
Mhm,
talking about legal vehicles for setting aside an insurance policy or investment account, something to fund, which is just put the money into the trust when this grandchild is ready to go to college,
mhm.
to make sure that there's funds for them to be okay. And people overcomplicate trust, but if they just envision that it's a box, an empty box, and it has your instructions for how you want whatever you put in there to come out,
Mhm.
and then you put stuff in there and you fund it. And it can start as simple with an insurance policy. It can be anything like that. But you write the rules for, okay, the child gets, it goes for college, they get this amount when they're 23, they get this amount when they're 30. You
Mhm.
can go down Cherry Creek and some streets in Denver, and we call those trust fund
Babies.
babies because they're not living in houses or going to college. They're not going to Boulder and DU because of what their parents did. They're going because of what their grandparents did. And
Absolutely.
that is one way to really focus the legacy piece
Mhm.
to ensure that there is something. I've seen many people in our community start businesses and we're relying on using that property as the business address. And then when the property is lost, where do they run their business from?
We run the business. Yeah.
They don't have that. So I mean, it seems like I'm making it complicated, but it isn't complicated if we just spend some more time on the learning side of it.
Mhm.
And it isn't, again, it isn't something that's a fault issue. We couldn't learn all these things because we simply didn't have access.
Exactly. And that's yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
It isn't that we missed it or we weren't smart enough or no, we did not have access to this information. We didn't know why there were food deserts. We didn't know why there were no options for improving properties in our neighborhoods, why you couldn't get a loan to help build up your property. Well, you couldn't because it was intentionally deprived. We didn't choose to all move into one area in all the cities. Of course not. That's where you had to move. You didn't have options. And so that's why I think it's incumbent upon us, people like you who have a professional skill, people like me who were blessed to get just amazing training. How dare we not
Mhm.
share information in the community to help make a difference? Because if we don't start here, if
Mhm.
we don't start, we're not going to get there. And it isn't insurmountable. It isn't. You
Mhm.
don't have to have a lot of money to get going. You have to have planning to know what the possibilities are. And that means we have to slow down sometime and take the baby steps to get there, to move forward.
Absolutely. Well, see, I love that we're in this conversation and that we're having it. We kind of ran into our time, but what I would love to do, and something you just said is we have these skill sets, we have the ability to do something, and you talked about a training that you do that have done. What I would love to do is have you come back, and next few weeks or something. And let's do some of that training. Let's put this stuff where it's out there online. It's a place where people can come, whether it's a podcast or whatever. We'll break it down so it's not, this 4-hour long seminar on doing something, which is not saying it's bad, but our attention spans, we know of our youth is that right now, quick stuff. But let's put together a series of 8 or 9 really just good videos that somebody could go in, that are titled, that could say, okay, this is what I do next, or this is how I start planning. Maybe it's one day, this is planning for insurances. This is planning to leave, to my kids, what happens if I die, that type of stuff, adding the trust component to it. If that's what is needed in whatever situation. I know there's a whole lot of folks that are renting out there, and a trust might not be the best thing to utilize, but at the same time, maybe a will is. And what needs to go into that? Or like you said, with the naming the kids who get some of the stuff on those policies, rechecking, all those things that we kind of touched upon today, but haven't gone into depth. I mean, I would love to even do one on Medicaid and advanced Medicaid planning, or just Medicaid planning in general, knowing that that's something that many of us may need to use in those years. And so if you're willing, I would love to have you back, and let's plan it out, and let's put a series together that we can put out there in the community that they can access at the time that they have available to do it. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, I think that's good, because actually that's what I do with Legal Wellness. It's like focused on what's really needed, and I'm a big believer that I am not going to have you sitting in front of me listening to me and not leave with some action steps about what you need to do. And the first action step is not, well, you need to call me and hire me.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. Okay. This is what you can do on your own to begin to move the process forward. So that mirrors exactly what I'm so interested in doing. So.
All right, then. Well, thank you for being on today. I appreciate you. I appreciate the time that you're willing to spend and what you do for the community. And sometimes those types of things go unnoticed because you can only meet the needs of so many people, and it seems like the needs are so great that sometimes we can't reach out and get it. But together, and I want to say this at the end of all of our podcasts, is one, for the folks on here, you can do this. You can do what's necessary. The second part of it is you deserve to have the information that you need to make it work. And then the final part of it is, let us help you. You don't have to figure this out by yourself. Nobody's asking you to go to the library and pull out some books when you don't even know what you're looking for and hope you stumble upon it. There are people in this community that are really good at what they do. TA is one of those. And so we want to make sure that you have access to her knowledge and her database, what's in her head or what she puts down on a piece of paper, so that you can grow generational and personal wealth. So thank you again for being on. You've been part of the Black Wealth Experience podcast, and we look forward to talking to you guys on the next one. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to say, TA?
No, I just really appreciate the chance to share information with our community, because you are right. We have the information. We need to share it. There are no secrets. There are no secrets.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you guys have a wonderful day, and we will talk with you soon. Well, thank you for tuning into our podcast today. It has been a fantastic opportunity for us to show you exactly what we're trying to do in the community. And that is to help people to make sure that they have the ability to realize home ownership. And so my name is Brian Arnold. I am a lender. I'm with City First Financial. And so if you have questions, I'm not doing this podcast so that we can, rush all the business over to City First Financial. I'm doing this podcast so that we can make sure that you are taken care of, that you have a real estate agent, that you have a loan officer, that you have a credit repair person, that you have an insurance person, that you have a financial advisor, all working with you towards making your home ownership realization happen. We're also going to be talking about, wealth generation and what it means to pass on to the next generation. I do trusts and wills, and making sure that the money that you've accumulated during your lifetime actually passes on to the next generation without going through a thing called probate. And so we want to make sure that we have some unique, different things that we may have talked about on this thing that can help you think about what that's going to look like. So thank you again for communicating. Go ahead and subscribe to these YouTube channels, whether it's on YouTube that you're watching the video, or if you are just listening to this on a podcast, that you are subscribing to the podcast, because we are going to have some amazing guests that are coming on and some amazing content. So thank you for the blackwealthexperience.org and getting on that and just coming in and listening to us and then taking advantage of the resources that we're hopefully and education that we're hopefully giving to you. So you have a wonderful, awesome, incredible Osric day. You are God's greatest gift, and I want to make sure that you know that. Talk with you guys soon.